Hello and welcome to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. It is a bonus community health show this month. We are on the Zooms today with Dr. Marcia Nelson. She is a board-certified surgeon specializing in breast surgery and care of breast diseases at Valley Health Breast Center. Valley Health sponsors this conversation that we have every single month. And since October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we thought it was pretty timely to have Dr. Nelson on the show. I do want to give a shout out, though, Dr. Nelson, before we jump into our conversation, to my dear friend Sandy Schwab, who is a breast cancer survivor. So I'm very happy and proud of Sandy. Listeners met her a few weeks ago. She did the show talking about a golf tournament that her German Shepherd rescue was having. So now this kind of comes full circle, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So let's start with what the statistics are. Give me an overview of breast cancer in general.
As many of you have heard, breast cancer is the most common cancer in women, although it's not the one that kills the most women, but it is pretty common, unfortunately. When we're talking about numbers, what you hear a lot in October and maybe sometimes throughout the year is that 1 in 8 women will have breast cancer in her life. But what that translates into would be a 12% risk. So it's actually fairly low when you think about it. 1 in 8, that's still fairly common as far as cancers go. But for one single woman, the overall risk is low. Now, that can go up depending on her family history. And it also depends on how old you are, because certainly the longer you live, you have higher risk because you've just been around longer. But those are the numbers that you'll typically see out there as far as statistics go.
Breast cancer is one of those cancers that, if it is caught early, has a pretty high survival rate, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What I tell my ladies when they come in, the goal is cure. And for the most part, early detection does mean much higher survival. That's why we promote mammograms and things like that. But like with any study, mammograms aren't perfect. And so there's other modalities. But yes, it's definitely very survivable, and women live long lives even after a diagnosis with breast cancer. Now, unfortunately, there are some women who do die from it. There are more aggressive versions, and that's going to happen. But for the most part, it is a curable disease.
Since breast cancer risk is different for practically every individual person, are there things that we can take into account, like family history, genetics, lifestyle? You mentioned the older you get, sometimes your risk goes up. What are some things that impact that risk for most women?
Well, biggest risk is being a woman and age, right? So those are the two things you can't change. You also can't change your family history. But contrary to what most people think, the number of women who have breast cancer that we can prove that there's a genetic component, right? Now, some women, I'm pretty sure there is, and we just don't have why, but is only about 5 to 10% of those women who have breast cancer. So it's actually a very small component with family risk, but it is there, right? So family risk is the third thing. Things like smoking. So smoking, it doesn't just increase your risk of lung cancer, it increases your risk of all cancers, and certainly breast cancer. I counsel everybody that they really should quit. It's not easy, but that is something that you can modify. And things like estrogen exposure, that's harder. There's so many factors. It's not just one thing that causes it. And most of the time we can't really pinpoint why did a woman get breast cancer, but all those things come into play. I also recommend ladies eating a healthy diet, plant-based, limit processed meats, limit meats, all that stuff that we should be doing anyway, right? It's good for your heart. It's also good for your breasts. And then of course, exercise, which we should all be doing as well. All those things help, but that doesn't mean that non-smokers don't get breast cancer. And it doesn't mean that people who are physically fit and eat really well don't get it. They do, because it's multiple things. But those are some of the risk factors. And of course, genetic mutations. I didn't say that, but that comes into play too.
When we're talking about genetics and family history, is it as important to know whether family members have specifically had breast cancer, or someone in your family having had ovarian cancer or lung cancer or some other type of cancer? Do those tend to be taken into account when you're looking at someone's overall risk?
Yes, they do. And it depends on the kind of cancer. And it also depends on how many family members you have that have had certain cancers. And so there's multiple things. We have a really excellent genetics program. We have three fabulous genetics counselors that we work with. And if someone comes to see us that meets the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, that's NCCN guidelines for referral, we send them to discuss whether they should get genetic testing. So there are some women who do meet criteria for testing, and the type of cancer does matter. Sometimes the specific kind of breast cancer that can matter for the specific woman. Certainly, if it's a man and he has breast cancer, that's rare. That's 1% of all breast cancer. He would get tested. Or even if a woman has a man in her family who had breast cancer, then she would qualify. So there's multiple things. And yes, the kind matters. Breast and ovarian cancer can be linked. That's with the BRCA1 and 2 mutations, made famous by Angelina Jolie. I say this to younger women and they're like, who? But
Right.
I met her surgeon at one of the national conferences. So I thought that was cool. That would be nerve wracking, right? To operate on a famous movie star, I think. She had a prophylactic mastectomy because her mother died of ovarian cancer. And those two cancers have a high risk of happening if you have that mutation.
We talked a second ago about the survival rate for early detection, but guidelines differ for when you should get your first mammogram. Some say 40, others 45 or 50.
I think for me, the bottom line is that yes, there's variation, and it's all based on how many women are you going to find that have a cancer, right? We recommend age 40 because unfortunately, we do see women in their young 40s, in their 30s who have breast cancer. Now, would I start it younger than that? No, unless they had significant risks. But my general recommendation is 40. And we recommend yearly because there's definitely interval cancers that happen in between the 2 years. However, you're right. The US Preventive Task Force and Cancer Society and different groups like that will say if you're this risk, you can do it every other year and you can stop at 70 and that sort of thing because there's no data. But just because there isn't any evidence, I think it's a very easy test to do. That being said, if a woman is 70 and has multiple issues, is she the best person to screen? Maybe not, but I don't think there's an age where you say, nope, no mammogram for you. So I think if a woman is willing to act on what is found on the mammogram, because that's what we're trying to find, right? Things that aren't palpable. So if she would be willing to do a biopsy, then I would say you start at 40 and go yearly till you're not going to do anything about it.
And as you mentioned, a mammogram isn't nearly as invasive as, say, a colonoscopy.
Right. Yeah,
So it's not
absolutely.
like it's a complicated thing to have year after year, and they provide such vital information.
Yeah. Now, some of my patients would argue with you that's the vice that they get put in. But no, you're right. It's a screening test. It definitely misses things. So sometimes we add in other things. But there's plenty of ladies I wish they had had a mammogram years before they present with this huge mass that maybe we would have certainly caught it sooner.
And is that what you're looking for on a mammogram? Just abnormalities that maybe a woman wouldn't be able to notice if she were doing a self exam?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that's what you're trying to find are the non-palpable masses. Sometimes there are suspicious microcalcifications, distortions, that kind of thing. And as far as the breast exam, I definitely encourage my patients to examine their breasts. That also isn't proven and there's no real recommendation on that, but there's plenty of ladies that have found their own cancers. So I think that's important. But yes, the mammogram is trying to find abnormalities that you wouldn't feel. Now, if you feel something, that's the next step, right? It's a mammogram and an ultrasound. But the annual, it's not to prevent the cancer, it's to find it early.
In doing some prep and some research for our conversation today, I happened upon an article about dense breasts and how sometimes mammograms are a little more complicated if you have dense breasts. Would I know if I have dense breasts? And
No,
what is the impact of that on a mammogram?
no, you wouldn't know by feeling your own breasts. I can't tell, and I've felt thousands of breasts at this point, right? But no, so density is just what it looks like on mammogram when you have thicker or fibrous tissue. So what happens is if you have dense breasts, it shows up as this whitish area. Now, just because a woman gets told, oh, you have dense breasts on mammogram, doesn't mean her entire breast is dense. It may just be small areas, but it's those areas that are harder to see, right? So cancers can hide there. Now we have ultrasounds. There are screening ultrasounds that you can do for women who have dense breasts. Occasionally, some women would qualify for an MRI to look as well. So I see ultrasounds as an adjunct. It's in addition. I don't think it replaces it because things like calcifications, those are hard to see on ultrasound. So I think it's nice to have an adjunct. We definitely use that, but it is harder to see things. And that's one of the limitations for mammograms, which is why younger women, you don't really get mammograms for them because they tend to have more dense breasts, and the risk of breast cancer, it's less, right? So if you have harder to read exam and not as many women in that age group, so there's not a benefit to do a screening study in the younger population.
That is another argument for having them done every year versus waiting every 2 years.
Right.
Or I'm sure a lot of women out there, oh, I'll go in a couple of years, and 3, 4 years pass before they have their second or third mammogram.
Right. But it's hard sometimes because sometimes not knowing, some people think not knowing is better, but I think it's better to know and get it done, find it early, and then move on with your life.
Let's take a break. When we come back, you were talking a second ago about BRCA genetic testing and things along those lines. Can we talk a little bit about that in the next segment?
Sure.
We are on the Zooms today with Dr. Marcia Nelson. She is a board certified surgeon specializing in breast surgery and care of breast diseases at Valley Health Breast Center. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So we're going to come back and talk more with her in just a couple of minutes.
Okay. I don't think Janet knows I'm recording this. She just stepped away to get another cup of coffee, so here's my chance. Hey everyone, it's Andy from the United Way of the Northern Shenandoah Valley. And yes, Janet, if you're hearing this, surprise. We're still celebrating the Valley Today's 2500th episode and this awesome community fundraiser you came up with. Here's the deal. Between now and the end of the year, it's Janet's goal to raise $2,500 to support the great work of the nonprofits in this community. If you give just $25 or more, you're going to be entered into a chance to be a guest on the show with Janet. If you give $250 or more, we'll make you a commercial, just like this one, that will air on the Valley Today podcast. So go to givebutter.com/The Valley Today right now before Janet realizes that I've hijacked her airtime. She's walking back in, cup of coffee in hand, gotta go. Remember to donate between now and the end of the year and support the great work of so many nonprofits and celebrate 2,500 episodes of the Valley Today.
Welcome back to the Valley Today. I am your host, Janet Michael. It is Community Health Day, sponsored every month by Valley Health. So we are on the Zooms today with Dr. Marcia Nelson. She is a board-certified surgeon specializing in breast surgery and care of breast diseases at Valley Health Breast Center. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I had my eyes opened during the first part of our conversation, Dr. Nelson, and then we chatted for a few minutes during the break. So I am going to admit out loud to the world that at 57, I have never had a mammogram. Can't really tell you why. I just never felt like I needed to go and do it. And I know I talk to Valley Health doctors every month about all of the things that we should be doing. But then you were talking earlier about the potential correlation between other types of cancers. And I have on my mother's side, I have an aunt, her sister passed away from ovarian cancer, and her mother, my grandmother, had ovarian cancer. And now I'm a little freaked out And Erica suggested, the silent Erica that nobody ever gets to see or hear on the show, suggested that I come clean and tell you that I'm going to schedule a mammogram.
I think that's great. You're not alone, though. Let me reassure you. And you're right. There's lots of ladies out there who just haven't gotten around to it. They're scared to get one. They think, well, it's a lot of radiation. I can tell you, you get more radiation from flying on an airplane than from getting a mammogram. It's pretty low dose of radiation. If you've ever gotten a CT scan, way more radiation with that. It's really minimal. And even cumulatively, it is not going to develop a breast cancer. A lot of ladies are worried about that. Some are worried about the discomfort. I am over the age, and I've been getting them for a while now. So I mean, they're not the most comfortable. It's not like I'd sign up for them every day, but the techs that do mammograms, and it's always women, by the way, they are very kind. And I've always had a good experience with that. And I think those are some of the fears. And I think the fear of the unknown of what it might find is another.
Well, and you mentioned that too, right before we went to break, that a lot of women think if I have it, I just don't even want to know about it. And I think part of that was maybe in the back of my brain, but I've seen so many movies and TV shows, and I read a lot about women who say that's what they thought, but if they could have avoided all of the extra things, like if it had been caught early and XYZ could have been done instead of XYZ plus chemo, plus radiation, plus all of these other things, that they would have done it sooner. I think sometimes we don't think about what that actually means in reality.
Right. Agreed. I think a lot of women would have come sooner. There are ladies who, unfortunately, they do get diagnosed and decide not to do anything. Unfortunately, at this point in medicine, we don't have things that are non-invasive to fix cancers. Maybe someday we will. And while I am a huge proponent of good nutrition and exercise and all of those things, and that does help, it's not going to take care of it on its own. I think you need to have Western medicine plus some of that, but I think you need both in order to beat it or get rid of it, because at this point we don't have the nanotechnology or some sort of Star Trek kind of futuristic
AI
stuff,
is
right?
not solving breast cancer for us yet.
Not yet. I mean, who knows? Maybe in the future.
Let's just say I come in and I get my mammogram. If everything looks great, then I get a pat on the back and I schedule it for next year and I come back and everything is fine. But for women who get that first mammogram and something looks a little off, what does that process look like? Is it immediately surgery? Is it doing more tests? Walk me through what that scenario is.
The first thing is, just because the radiologist calls you back, if you have a screening mammogram and there's something, they're going to call you back for what's called a diagnostic mammogram and possibly an ultrasound. It doesn't mean you have cancer, right? It just means you need more imaging. And more imaging may mean that they do it and then they say, you know what, it looks good. Or sometimes they'll say, it's probably good. And there's that word probably that freaks everyone out. And I end up getting a lot of consults for that. But we want to re-image you. So sometimes that happens. And it just means that it doesn't look suspicious enough to biopsy now, but they want to check you sooner than a year. So some women fall into that category. And then some women fall into well, we're not totally sure it's cancer, but we need to biopsy it. And most of those are not cancer, actually, but some of them will be. And you need tissue. You need something to say, okay, it's this, because I can't do anything until we have actual tissue. Because a lot of decisions are made based on the kind of cancer, different details about it. But that's the process. And it can take time. And that's what can be frustrating to ladies is, well, I had my screening mammogram. It's a few months from now. And then it's going to be a few more weeks till the diagnostic, and then maybe a week or so to do the biopsy. So it's a process, and it can be very nerve-wracking.
Which is ironic, considering some of these women have waited years to get their mammogram, and then suddenly time is vital,
Right.
whereas
No, I
before,
get
not
it.
so much.
Right. I mean, I get it. I totally get it. And I think they do a great job at the diagnostic center to try to get ladies in as soon as they can. Obviously, something that looks more worrisome, try to push that to the top of the list. And I do think they do a good job, but this is a huge catchment area in Winchester. You figure it's Winchester, all of Frederick County, all of the surrounding areas, the Panhandle, a little bit east into Clark County and some south. So it's a big area. I think that waiting can sometimes be the worst part.
When you were talking earlier about genetic testing for BRCA, because I've often thought about that too, knowing that I had this particular scenario. I have other family members not as closely related as my aunt and my grandmother who have had various other forms of cancer. And I've always wondered whether I should go get tested for that. I can't just walk in off the street and say, hey, I'd like you to give me this test. There's a process for that too, right?
Right. So typically, the way that we do referrals or how that process works is a woman will be referred to us here at the breast center because of a family history of breast cancer. And so we go through her history. Does she have any issues? Does she need imaging? And then discuss whether she meets criteria to be referred to genetics. Because really, not everyone needs to be referred to genetics. And even of all the people that I refer, most of them are negative. And that's to be expected because you have to cast a wider net than what you expect. Otherwise, you're not going to catch any of people that have it. So then once we establish that, yes, you meet criteria, then you get referred. And then the counselor calls the woman and goes over the history and so forth, and then discusses whether she should get tested or not. Then the woman, usually it's women, decides to go ahead with testing or not. And these days, we don't just test for BRCA 1 and 2. There's a whole bunch of other mutations. So it's about 30 or so. It's definitely more than it used to be when I started medical school. Back then, as my children like to say, dinosaur time. But it's a whole alphabet soup. There are different mutations and they correlate with different cancers. If a woman tests positive, then we bring her back and go over what are her specific risks and go through all that. So it's a process, but yeah, I mean, we definitely have identified people that have a mutation and then we change their surveillance.
And it doesn't also mean that you immediately do what Angelina Jolie did. There are options even beyond, yes, this could be a problem for you. It doesn't immediately mean that you have a full mastectomy, for example.
No, absolutely not. And actually, the only mutations where there is data to support doing mastectomies are prophylactic, meaning you don't have cancer and you're taking your breasts off to prevent it, is BRCA 1 and 2. So for the ladies that are not BRCA 1 and 2 and have a different mutation, the data isn't even there. Now, that's where there's nuance. But right, we watch them closely. Even if they're BRCA 1 or 2, it doesn't mean that I'm going to tell them, okay, it's time to take your breasts off. It's not as simple as that. But most women do not need to have that done.
So before we wrap up, I will commit to scheduling a mammogram. I encourage any of my female listeners today to schedule theirs, whether they've had one or not. They can send me a message on the River 95.3's Facebook page. They can email me. They can send me a text. All of my contact information is readily available out there. And I want to know what date they've gotten theirs scheduled from. And then maybe I'll pull a bunch of them together and we'll come back and we'll do our show and have you back on, Dr. Nelson, to talk about what our experience was like. How about that?
Okay, that sounds great. I'm happy I inspired you to go get yours scheduled. So I'm going to have to hold you to it.
I am quite sure that, again, Silent Erica is going to give you all of my contact information before we finish today so that you can do that. But thank you for taking the time today. I do appreciate the education.
Yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure to be here.
I will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of The Valley Today, a few minutes after noon. So meet me here then.